I have some of the things that you were mentioning before, because I think this is very important to talk about, because you've said several times, these aren't my words, these are the words of Netanyahu's government on what they plan on doing. Netanyahu's announcement on the attack. Citizens of Israel, we are at war, not in operation or in rounds, but at war. This morning, Hamas launched a murderous surprise attack against the state of Israel and its citizens. We have been in this since the early morning hours. I've convened the heads of the security establishment and ordered, first of all, to clear out the communities. They have been infiltrated by terrorists. This is currently being carried out. At the same time, I have ordered an extensive mobilization and that we return fire of a magnitude that the enemy has not known. The enemy will pay an unprecedented price. In the meantime, I call on all the citizens of Israel to strictly adhere to the directives of the IDF. We are at war, and we will win it.
I want to clarify a point there. There were 2 points. That one that you just heard, and secondly, Netanyahu made a statement that the Palestinians should leave from the areas.
I was going to get to that. Yeah.
Let me get to the first one, the one that you just played.
Gotcha.
I don't want to sound too technical about this, because often legal technicalities just confuse more than the enlightened. However, here I think the point is important. He said Hamas attacked the state of Israel. That is incorrect. Gaza is part of Israel. Israel has de facto annexed the West Bank, annexed Gaza. Under international law, very simple, every one of your viewers will understand it. Under international law, what distinguishes an occupation from an illegal annexation, it's very simple. An occupation is temporary. An annexation or an illegal annexation is permanent. Those territories were occupied, meaning the West Bank and Gaza, a half century ago. A half century. It's permanent. That being the case, Gaza could not have attacked the state of Israel. Gaza is part of the state of Israel. What we witnessed a couple of days ago was a slave revolt. The slaves rose up in revolt against their masters. That's what happened. So don't let these technicalities about our state is under attack. No. Gaza, the West Bank, by international law, and I know the law. I teach the law, I've studied the law. Under international law, Gaza and the West Bank are part of Israel. What we witnessed was a slave revolt. I'm not saying I approve of it, but I won't say I disapprove of it. Then the course of slave revolts, historically, many innocents are killed.
That was awesome. And before you get to your second point, which I was going to bring up because I have it written down here, if Netanyahu is stating that he's going to hit the Gaza Strip hard, and he says people should leave, but they can't go anywhere, isn't he talking about genocide? And this is the defense.
See, like the thing
like where are you going to go? You can't. You're not even allowed to go. You're not even allowed to exit that way. But this is the defense minister saying we're fighting human animals, referring to Palestinians, and vowed to attack accordingly. I'm going to play this, and then please, Professor Finkelstein, give us your thoughts on that whole statement of him saying, you know, pretty much it reminds me of when George Bush was like saying in Iraq, we're going to hit you, so get out of there. Like, where are you going to go? But this is even worse because they're not allowed to technically leave.
Not technically, period. They're not allowed to leave. That's the problem.
Period. Yes.
That's the problem.
Yeah. Let's play this and we'll get your further get your opinion on it. We are putting a complete siege on Gaza. No electricity, no food, no water, no gas. It is all closed. We are fighting animals and acting accordingly. That's the defense minister.
To do sieges?
Well, we have Professor Finkelstein. We can ask him, Professor Finkelstein.
This is Yemen we just got done helping with.
I want to just emphasize, for the sake of your listeners, I said at the beginning, if you understood certain basic facts, everything becomes blindingly clear. When he's saying animals, we're fighting animals. Half of those animals are children. Half of the animals are children. That's who they are instituting these sanctions against. They are attempting to subdue through starvation, through lack of water. They're trying to subdue a population that's 1 million children. And I really do wonder, I'm serious now, if that fact, that simple basic fact, if every day our media pointed out, hey, you realize 1 million of the people in Gaza are children, half the population? I really wonder whether the American people would go along with these statements that are being made.
They wouldn't. I don't think people know it's a concentration camp like that. I really didn't realize the population was that high until you said it.
How dense it was?
Because, what is Israel the size of New Jersey? So my town I grew up in on the shore is probably about that size. Yeah. It had 30,000 people in it. 5 million people and no one can leave? Yeah. Like that's like literally concentrating people in a camp.
Yeah.
My late mother occasionally spoke out on the question of the Palestinians. And one of the things she said, I quoted in the very first book I wrote on the Israel-Palestine conflict back in 1996. She was once asked about the Israel-Palestine conflict, obviously because she's Jewish, she survived the Nazi Holocaust, and because I had been speaking and writing on the subject. And she said, quote, "What crime did the people of Palestine commit except to be born in Palestine?" Now, I would say, whatever you want to say about Hamas, I may not agree with you, but for argument's sake, I will concede. What crime did the 1 million children in Gaza commit except to be born in a concentration camp? What crime did the 1 million children in Gaza? Million happens to be a sacred number for Jews. Because of the 6 million Jews who were exterminated during World War II, 1 million were children. So,
yeah,
that million number, and it's 1 million children in Gaza. It's 1 million children. And now they're openly boasting about wiping them out. I don't think the American people, during the war in Vietnam, the Secretary General of the UN was a fellow named U Thant. He was from Burma, very decent guy. And during the war in Vietnam, he once said, the first casualty of war is truth.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went on to say, I do not believe if the American people were aware of the true facts of this war, they would support it. Now, it is true. He said that, I think, in 1965. It took a long time before the truth about the war seeped out. But once it did, there really was a lot of genuine opposition to that war. And I do believe that where the basic, I don't mean reading even my books, which can be very dense, just the basic facts, were they known, I don't think people would go along with it. And that's why I leapt at the opportunity to appear in your program. I don't want to toot my own horn, but on the other hand, I've never seen any point in false modesty if acknowledging your competence can be of a service. I very much doubt there's anybody in the West who has more scholarly knowledge on the Israel-Palestine conflict, or Gaza in particular, than myself.
Mm-hmm.
I devoted a large part of my adult life. And yours is the first program in a very long time that I've been allowed on to reach a reasonably sized audience.
Yeah.
And it's impossible, especially now, amidst this hysteria. And I'm not saying, incidentally, I'm not saying that a lot of the visceral, the instinctive revulsion, I'm not even saying it's invalid. I can understand it. But even that instinctive, visceral revulsion has to be placed in the context of what has happened to Gaza, not since 1948, because as I said, it all begins when approximately 300,000 refugees from Israel land in Gaza. But not even to go all the way back there, but just in your lifetime and in my lifetime. I'm talking about since 2006. It's 18 years ago. That's not so long. Just that history. If they only knew the past 18 years, I think I can accept the revulsion and the outrage, but I still believe people are capable of both feeling that revulsion and outrage and still saying, you know, I kind of get it. I kind of get it.
People don't know it's a prison.
Yeah,
they don't know it's a prison.
They don't.
If you think of it as a clear, like in a prison riot,
yeah,
that's what you describe. And when you hear a prison riot, like, oh, it's revolting.
Slaves don't attack; they revolt. Right? That's exactly.
But nobody thinks of it as a prison like that, and that's the key to it because it makes a lot of sense when you think of it that way.
Well, we have a controlled media apparatus that is controlled by the Israeli lobbyists. They have a lot to say when it comes to things. So we're in a race right now to get the truth out there before it gets any worse. Because, like you said, Professor Finkelstein, the number one casualty of war is the truth. Well, I don't want it to get to war, right? We're trying to stop and educate people what's really going on there, so there will be some pushback. And I've noticed some pushback online. There has been a little, comforting things to see. All right, some people are starting to get this, and they're going to push back. Please continue, Professor Finkelstein.
Well, either he's a pathological liar or he's completely demented if Netanyahu really believes they could go somewhere.
They know people don't know. Like, I think people kind of think, I swear to God, that, they just have to do like checkpoints. They can probably leave. I don't think people understand.
They can't.
Like, and I've known pieces of it for a long time, but I never thought of it. I mean, I remember when the blockade happened, the list of stuff people couldn't have, like musical instruments. It seemed like a bit much at the time, but time flies. Much like Guantanamo that's still open. Yeah, just kind of forgot about it.
At one point, hard to believe, but facts, as the British adage goes, are stubborn things. At one point, the Israeli officials actually calibrated. I hope you listeners will listen. They calibrated the number of calories that should be allocated.
I remember that.
Each Gazan to keep them just above starvation. To keep them just, they calibrate.
Yeah.
That's almost German precise.
Unfortunately, I didn't say, I should say, fortunately, I didn't say that, but fortunately, you did say that.
Yes. No, it calls to mind some historical things.
It calls to mind people who do experiments on children, but I won't go further because your program might be canceled forever.
Yeah.
So I'll just leave it at that.
This might be Japanese level even.
Let's show just really quickly, because this is what's going on. Gaza is now blackout. Gaza, as bombs are being dropped. Israel right now, they just hit a high-rise building, one of the tallest buildings in Gaza. Take a look at this. Now, there was a worry, Professor Finkelstein, that once this pushback took place, this action on Saturday morning, that Israel is just going to wipe it clean. What are they? The term is called mowing the lawn, right? I believe is the term when they just go in there and bomb the hell out of the place. But this has come back. Hamas threatens to execute civilian hostages and air each execution via television. Dan Cohen had just mentioned the Palestinian resistance just announced that if Israeli bombardment of civilian homes without warning continues, it will begin to execute captives one by one and publish the videos for all to see. Hamas has more than 100 Israelis held captive. Israeli society simply won't be able to handle the psychological pressure of watching these executions. If Israel wants to save its citizens' lives, it must negotiate. No amount of bombing can change this. And he put down...
Won't they?
Checkmate is what he put down.
I don't think it's a checkmate. You think they won't let them people die and go ahead and...
I don't know, but we do see a lot of chaos now at the airport with a lot of Israelis trying to leave the country. I don't know if they have the stomach to deal with this. They've never been under this type of pressure before, I think, the Israeli citizens. That's why when people had talked about the festival that they raided, I mean, it was on the other side of the Gaza fence. How can you be so naive as to think that you're going to be safe there, that attack could never happen upon you? You're right on the other side of the fence. You're not in Tel Aviv.
On Ukraine.
I know. But Professor Finkelstein, what are your thoughts about this as far as...
I'm going to. Thank you. Yeah. If you go back to like 2007, and you look at the Israeli government statements about what they were going to do to Gaza just before Operation Cast Lead, I can assure you, because I quote them at length in my book on Gaza, I can assure you they made the identical statements as they made today. Now, you might ask, well, then why didn't they do back then what they did today? And the answer is very, very simple. It's because international public opinion reined them in. There were some restraints, not a lot. But Gaza lived to see another day. Why do I say this? Because all of those people, from Matt Gaetz to Marjorie Taylor
Greene. Yeah.
Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm thinking of Mary Tyler Moore.
Sorry.
She's spinning around in the city of...
My age away. From Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene, all the way to AOC and Bernie Sanders, and in the middle, Chuck Schumer and Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard and Nikki Haley. They bear the burden. They could rein in Israel. Israel can be stopped if international public opinion bore down on Israel. Israel is not an island. It lives in the world. And the pressure on it can become unbearable. The statements that you read this evening, all of them, every one is prosecutable in the International Criminal Court. Everyone could haul these monsters before the court. So the institutions are there to stop them. And it's the green light that's been given them by our Congress and our elected officials, they bear the responsibility, not primary, but certainly not tertiary, at least secondary responsibility for the annihilation of the people of Gaza.
Yeah.
Every one of them should be held accountable for every child that's starved to death, for every infant who dies because of a lack of water. Today, according to a friend of mine who's generally very reliable, they bombed the incubator center in Al-Shifa Hospital. I actually have a little connection to Gaza. After one of the annihilatory attacks, I raised $100,000 for one of the hospitals, and they put up a plaque at my request to the memory of my parents in that hospital in Gaza. And my guess is, knowing Israel as I do, that hospital is no longer there. And that is, we have to say, I won't say primary responsibility, but certainly secondary responsibility, culpability, is that of all those people who you cited, because Israel can be reined in. All the United States has to say is, Mr. Netanyahu, Mr. Defense Minister, if the case goes before the International Criminal Court, sorry, we're not going to support you. We're not going to block the prosecution. And I dare say, having studied international law and having studied prosecutions in that court, it's actually an awful court, but that's beside the point, there is quite sufficient evidence to bring back a guilty verdict.
Can I ask a question? Does Israel belong? You know how we don't belong to that court? Because, otherwise we could get prosecuted for what we did in Iraq. So back around then we withdrew for the Hague Invasion Act. Bush signed that if we ever are brought on trial, anyone will invade the Hague. Is Israel a part of it? Or do they take, it seems like they do whatever we do. Like, hey, we can do whatever crimes we want. It seems like it's the same as us.
There is technically a state of Palestine, and the state of Palestine does belong to the International Criminal Court, and the state of Palestine has twice brought cases before the criminal court on the basis of Israel conduct in the occupied territories, and also when it attacked the humanitarian flotilla in 2010.
Yeah.
May 31st, 2010.
Yeah.
So technically, yes, it can be prosecuted. And if the United States says, we're not going to protect you, I think Israel will think twice.
Yeah.
It's the impunity. It's the impunity granted this government and country by the United States in particular, but also the EU, that enables it to carry on like Mongol hordes, because that's exactly what they are. It's Genghis Khan, it's Mongol hordes. But they couldn't do that without the impunity granted them by all the people you quoted this evening.
Hey, come see us on tour. We're going to be in Dallas, Houston, San Diego, Bloomington, Illinois, Indianapolis, and Levittown, New York. Wow, that's a lot of dates. See you there.